This is Eric Metaxas talking with five-time Emmy Award winning Sharyl Atkinson, and eventually they get to the topic of fake news and how it popped up suddenly in September of 2016, and it's related to the parent company of Google, which is Alphabet, and they were huge donors to the Hillary Clinton campaign. So anyway, Sharyl Atkinson's highly respected. I love Eric Metaxas, but Sharyl's won 5 Emmys, and she got fired or left ABC because they wouldn't let her report on what she wanted to report on because they were getting phone calls from the White House every day.
Folks, we're talking about the news, about journalism. We're talking with five-time Emmy winner Sharyl Atkinson. She's the author of the book Stonewalled, My Fight for Truth Against the Forces of Obstruction, Intimidation, and Harassment in Obama's Washington, and now a brand new book called The Smear, How Shady Political Operatives and Fake News Control What You See, What You Think, and How You Vote. So, Sharyl, when we talk about fake news, what do you mean by that?
I developed a definition, actually several definitions, by speaking to observers and people in this industry. I think there's several kinds. I don't just speak with one definition. I didn't make up my own definition in this instance. I think I look at the history of fake news. It came up in about September of 2016, quite suddenly, and you can read about how that was I believe, a liberal initiative through a nonprofit that was funded by the parent company of Google, Alphabet, who was a main primary donor for Hillary Clinton.
See, now that actually scares me right there. I just want to stop you. That's a stunning thing, right? I mean, we're not naive. At the same time, these corporations are so powerful. The idea that they have the money and the ability to launch, a cultural meme in a way like that, that to me is frightening.
Look, every phrase that emerges that's new, every new word someone uses for something, you should consider, if you listen to these operators that I interview for the book, has been created and put there by PR firms that work for these industries. But fake news emerged so suddenly, and I was writing the book, I saw that as a rollout of a propaganda campaign.
Right.
So I dug into it, and pretty soon President Obama came out and announced, this wasn't an accident, at a press availability, that there was a need for somebody to curate the news. And I thought it was a curious phrasing that he used. And I knew there was no public grassroots push for this. This was something that was being created. So I was curious about that, because the public wasn't sitting there saying, someone needs to go through and censor and sort through what I see.
What a concept. I mean, what a concept, because it makes you wonder, how's it supposed to work? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The minute he said it, almost every day thereafter, fake news was in the headlines as a story, as if the press got their marching orders. We so little question these narratives. We just take off and go with them. And then pretty soon, Hillary Clinton was supporting it, and David Brock, who is head of Media Matters, who works for her, they were all taking up the mantle. And as I described quite hilariously, I think, in the book, Donald Trump, being master marketer, took over that phrase. And now a lot of people think he created it. Yeah. He simply co-opted it and turned it on its head, much to their chagrin.
To some extent, he's nothing but a political genius. I mean, I laugh and laugh and laugh. This is a perfect example of it. It's kind of funny. But the idea of fake news has at least, and it's backfired in a more general sense, that it makes people aware that what they're reading may not be as it is, that they need to think more carefully, and that they themselves, since we live in a free republic and we have self-government, we ourselves are supposed to curate the news. We ourselves are supposed to take responsibility, as you said earlier. Maybe it doesn't mean we have to watch Congress on C-SPAN, but at least we have to be aware that people are trying to manipulate, what we hear, how we hear it. It's grievous.
Yes, and I think that any third-party effort to try to do that for us, even if well-intentioned, is probably misguided, because I don't think Facebook has put ABC and maybe Associated Press and New York Times and Washington Post, I can't remember all the groups, to the task of curating fake news and sorting through that for us. Well, these are some of the very groups that some people think promulgate fake news and, quite frankly, have been factually proven to have made some of the most egregious mistakes in reporting in recent months, that they would be arbiters is really,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense. So
Exactly.
I think as much of a mess as the internet is in some respects,
Right.
the idea that a third party needs to censor what we see or make sure, we don't see certain things, I think is a bad thing. And I believe that certain forces, not just the left, but certain corporate interests, saw the web as the last thing they hadn't developed almost complete control over,
Right.
where people could still find things contrary to the prevailing narrative that they've been so successful at putting out on controversial topics so that no one would even discuss the other side. Well, you could still find that online. And I think that's what they really want to control.
Right, and which is, of course, utterly horrifying. We're living in some challenging times. Just the idea of what technology is capable of doing, and when you think of Facebook, as you just said, Facebook, the power that Facebook has, I really think it's time for some trust busting, for the concept of monopolies to be brought up again, because it's very dangerous when Apple or Google or any of these companies has the power that it has. I'm not sure quite what we're to do about it, but people need to think about it. And obviously, in your book, The Smear, you're helping them think about it.
I did a story about a young man, a technology guy from Silicon Valley, who got shut out because he attended a Trump rally and videotaped some violence against Trump supporters, and lost business and was, treated horribly, moved to Texas, started an alternative to Twitter called Gab, where they don't censor on the basis of political viewpoints. And he, trying to go up against these monopolies, because that's his whole point, that Silicon Valley runs a lot of these, from one viewpoint, runs a lot of these social media sites and corporate technology companies. He was immediately smeared as a alt-right, racist, white nationalist, everything you can imagine, while he has actually the most diverse, probably small startup group that exists in terms of, a Muslim and I believe an Indian, and he's completely diverse. Not what they say,
Right.
but if you Google him, they want to make it where you don't use that service, and this is what happens to people who color outside the lines.
Well, and again, the issue is, how do we curate the curators? The free market is something that can be manipulated. It's very complicated, and obviously people have to take an interest in all this. I have spoken about this a lot, that those of us who believe in self-government and freedom need to understand how much that requires of each of us. We can be governed by others and we have very little to do, but if we want to govern ourselves, it actually takes some work, and we need to understand that. We're going to be right back, folks, talking to Sharyl Attkisson. The new book is called The Smear: How Shady Political Operatives and Fake News Control What You See, What You Think, and How You Vote. We'll be right back. The book called The Smear. Sharyl, it's difficult to pivot from ABBA, but I want to ask you, what is the reception to you these days? I mean, it seems to me, I see you on places like Fox News, that people who try to be fair, as you try to do, often are forced to go to what's perceived as conservative or more conservative or traditional news outlets. How do you feel about that? Where are you these days in terms of all that?
I think that's a great observation, and if you don't mind, we'll make this the last comment. I have another call coming in, but
Yeah.
the as conservative leaning when that's simply not the case. But that's again part of this effort to try to discredit those who, in my view, speak the truth or do report facts from the side where they don't want the public to hear.
Well, that's exactly right, and I guess I'm concerned for the country, which is why I'm glad you've written this book. I know it just came out recently at this summer, and has the reception to the book been what you think, or have the people that wanted to push you out, are they pushing you out? In other words, are they deciding not to review the book? Is the New York Times, have they deigned to review the book. We've only got about a minute left. Is that something that you have to deal with even with publishing a book like this?
Yes, but I didn't count on them to review it. I mean, twice I've made the New York Times bestseller list and yet not been reviewed by them, and that's okay. People are finding the book. I have a wide reception for it from college campuses that have been asking me to speak, that have assigned the book, from press groups. So I feel like it's getting some broad interest. There are a lot of people in my industry. Good reporters hate what's happened to the news, so there are a lot of people who agree and want this publicized. So I'm pretty pleased with the reception.
Well, you've been a voice, I think, for a lot of people out there in the world of journalism who are afraid to speak out, because you have the laurels that you have, Emmy Awards and other awards, that you have ability to say things in a way with some credibility that they're forced to deal with. I guess I'm sure privately you hear from people in the news business who, just 30 seconds left, forgive me, who are glad that you're speaking about what you're speaking.
They are. A lot of them have asked for a job at the show that I have now, Full Measure, but I have such a small staff. A lot of them are telling me their own stories and accounts of what's happened to them. But yes, I've heard from quite a few people who are well known in our field.
And where is Full Measure airing these days?
That's depending on your market. 43 million households we feed to on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox on Sundays. If you check your listings, or you can go to fullmeasure.news online to see the pieces or see where we air.
All right. Well, Sharyl Atkinson, a joy to have you. Thanks for being on the program.
You're very kind. Thanks for having me.
Hope to have you back. Folks, the book is The Smear. Get a